So today, we're cracking open a history book that's more than 140 years old. And let me tell you, this was a defiant act, an effort to reclaim a story that was deliberately buried. We're going way back, before the slave ships, before the chains, to uncover a lost history of incredible kingdoms, empires, and scholars. And this right here, this is the core belief of George W. Williams. This man was a Civil War veteran, a politician, and a trailblazing historian. He saw this massive gaping hole in the story of humanity and just decided, I'm going to fill it. That one powerful sentence, well, it was the fuel for his entire mission. And what a mission it was. This was way more than just writing a book. It was a full-on intellectual attack on the racist ideas of his time. Williams planned to use the hard, undeniable power of historical facts to just completely dismantle the fake science and the twisted Bible stories that were used to justify slavery and dehumanize an entire group of people. So, his first target was one of the most widespread and, frankly, poisonous myths of the 19th century. It was a story twisted to serve a horrible purpose, the so-called Curse of Canaan. For generations, this was literally preached from pulpits as God's permission to enslave people. This slide really breaks down this central lie perfectly. On one side, you have the myth, pulled straight from the book of Genesis, which claimed a curse from Noah basically sentenced his son Ham's descendants to a life of servitude. But Williams just cuts right through all that nonsense. He argues it wasn't a prophecy at all. It was just the bitter, angry outburst of a father who was embarrassed by his son. You know, a very human moment, not some divine decree from on high. And he didn't just have an opinion, he brought the historical receipts. So let's walk through his evidence. First, the curse was aimed specifically at Canaan, just one of Ham's 4 sons. Second, Canaan's actual descendants, like the incredible Carthaginians, built an empire that rivaled Rome. They were conquerors, not slaves. But here's the knockout punch. The Bible itself shows the Hebrews, descendants of Shem, being enslaved by the Egyptians, who were descendants of Ham. That totally flips the supposed prophecy on its head and proves that historically, the curse never even came true. Okay, so with that central myth totally dismantled, Williams started building his case, and his point was this. The story of the Negro race doesn't start with slavery. It starts with an ancient global legacy of greatness. The most important thing to grasp here is just how old this history is. I mean, Williams was pointing to Egyptian monuments that are 5,000 years old. This is way before Athens or Rome were even founded. And these ancient carvings show Negro figures not just as captives, but as a core part of society, as soldiers, as priests, and even as royalty. The Greek historian Herodotus even wrote that 18 pharaohs were Ethiopian. And this presence wasn't just in Africa. Williams painstakingly gathered evidence from all over the world. From temples in Japan and Thailand with idols carved to look like Negroes, to the fact that major Egyptian and Hindu gods like Osiris and Krishna were depicted as black. He's painting this picture of a truly cosmopolitan people whose ancient journeys can be traced all across the globe. All right, now let's shift gears to West Africa, because the story just keeps building. While Europe was slogging through the Dark Ages, powerful, organized empires were absolutely thriving. And we're not talking about scattered tribes. These were sophisticated states with complex governments, incredible armies, and legendary wealth. Take the Kingdom of Benin, for example. When Portuguese explorers showed up in the 1480s, they met a really shrewd king who knew how to play high-stakes international diplomacy. He was like, sure, I'll think about converting my nation to Christianity, but my price is a European wife. This was a ruler negotiating from a serious position of power. Then you have Dahomey, a kingdom famous for its military strength. And what's really amazing is that its army had these elite, highly disciplined regiments made up entirely of women warriors. They were some of the most feared soldiers in the whole region. And we have to talk about the Ashanti Empire. This was a dominant military power that grew by conquest. In 1807, they didn't just beat their local rivals. They beat a force that was backed by the British Empire, forcing an English fort to surrender. These were organized, militarized, and incredibly powerful nations. So next up, Williams tackles the physical stereotypes that were used to justify racism. But he didn't just deny them. He came up with a pretty radical scientific theory for where they came from, one that was all about the environment, not biology. This was the big question he had to answer. If this was a race of kings and empire builders, then where did that demeaning stereotype, the Negro type so tied to slavery, actually come from? His theory was pretty revolutionary for its time. Williams argued that the physical traits people associated with enslaved people weren't their original state, but the result of, well, degradation. He suggested that the strongest African populations lived up in the healthy, mountainous highlands. It was the weaker groups, the conquered people, or the outcasts who got pushed down into low-lying, swampy, malarial areas. Over generations, their health suffered, and it was this vulnerable population that European slavers found it easiest to capture. Now, to bring his history right into his own time, Williams pointed to two incredible 19th century experiments in Black freedom. He held them up as living, breathing proof of the race's ability to progress and govern itself. First, there was Sierra Leone, a colony founded specifically for freed slaves. It became this beacon of progress. Education was everything to them. And by 1850, get this, 56 out of 61 teachers in its mission schools were Native Africans. That just shows an incredible commitment to self-reliance in education. And then there's Liberia. Founded by free Black Americans who chose to go back to Africa, it grew to become the continent's first modern republic. They built their own government, their own churches, their own colleges. It was a powerful symbol of self-determination and a direct counterargument to anyone who claimed they couldn't govern themselves. So, why does all of this matter? Because Williams's massive work wasn't really just about fixing the past. It was a carefully built argument for a better, more just American future. His entire history was a challenge to the nation to finally live up to its own ideals. A vision of a day where labels like black and white would just dissolve, leaving only American citizens with equal rights and duties. It's a challenge from 1882 that kind of leaves us with a big question for today, doesn't it? How much closer are we to that day now?